If you ever see a man standing behind that glass at 2 in the morning, Claire, don't let him see you looking back. That was what Mrs. Whitmore had told me 3 years ago, and until that night, I had laughed every time I remembered it. At 2:07 a.m., I stopped laughing. The atelier was silent except for the soft hum of the sewing machine and the rain tapping against the tall windows of the old Manhattan building. I had been working alone for nearly an hour, finishing a black silk jacket that had to be delivered before sunrise. My fingers moved automatically through the fabric, needle, thread, fold, press. Silk was like that. It remembered every careless touch. One wrong movement, and the entire shape changed. I liked that about it. Fabric never pretended to be something it wasn't. People did. I leaned back and rubbed my tired eyes. 25 years old, 3 cups of coffee, and another 12-hour shift behind me. My apartment was only 20 minutes away, but rent in Manhattan had taught me that 20 minutes of extra work could mean groceries for the week. I reached for the scissors when something moved beyond the glass. I froze. Across the narrow courtyard, beneath the pale glow of a security light, stood a man. He was completely still. Black coat. Dark hair. Hands at his sides. He wasn't looking at his phone. He wasn't waiting for a cab. He was looking directly at the atelier. At me. My first instinct was to turn off the lights. Instead, I stood there with the scissors in my hand, watching his silhouette become sharper against the rain-streaked glass. He looked strangely out of place and perfectly at home at the same time. Then lightning flashed somewhere above the city, and for one brief second I saw his face clearly. Calm. Pale. Impossible to read. I had seen him before, though I couldn't remember where. Not in person. In newspapers, maybe. On the business pages my landlord left in the lobby. I lowered the scissors and stepped closer to the window. The man didn't move. My heart began beating faster, not because I felt threatened, but because something about him seemed familiar in a way I couldn't explain. Then he turned and walked away. Just like that. I waited until his silhouette disappeared before I returned to my work table. The black silk jacket was still there, perfectly folded beneath the warm lamp. I lifted it, checking the stitching one final time. That's when something slipped from underneath the fabric and landed on the table. A small square of black silk. I frowned. I hadn't cut it. I picked it up and turned it over. On the inside was a tiny silver emblem, stitched so precisely I almost missed it. A crown surrounded by a single letter B. My stomach tightened. I had seen that symbol too. Everyone in the city had. Blackwood. Adrian Blackwood. The name belonged to a man people rarely discussed above a whisper. Wealthy. Private. Powerful. A businessman according to official records. Something else according to everyone who knew better. I stared at the emblem, then toward the window where the stranger had disappeared. My phone suddenly lit up on the table. One new message. No number. No name. Just 6 words. You were not supposed to find this. You were not supposed to find this. I read the message 3 times, hoping the words would change. They did not. My first thought was that someone was playing a joke. My second was that I should call the police. My third was the one that made my hands go cold. Someone knew exactly where I worked. I looked toward the windows again. The courtyard was empty. Rain slid down the glass in thin silver lines, turning the city lights into blurred streaks. I picked up my phone and checked the message details. No number. No contact name. Nothing. I typed, "Who is this?" My thumb hovered over the screen. Then I deleted it. If someone wanted to scare me, answering was exactly what they wanted. I locked the phone and tried to return to the jacket, but the room suddenly felt different. Every little sound seemed louder. The ticking wall clock. The radiator clicking beneath the window. The soft buzz of the overhead lights. I folded the black silk square and slipped it into my coat pocket. I told myself I would take it to the police in the morning. Then I remembered the name stitched into it. Blackwood. Adrian Blackwood. I had heard stories about him for years. Never directly. Never from anyone who would put those stories in writing. He owned hotels, restaurants, shipping companies, and half a dozen buildings in Manhattan. At least, that was what the public records said. People whispered that his real influence reached much farther. I had never cared about rich men and their private empires. My world was thread, fabric, rent payments, and early morning subway rides. I finished the jacket at 2:31 a.m., packed my tools, turned off the lights, and locked the atelier. The hallway outside was almost completely dark. I walked toward the elevator, listening to the quiet echo of my shoes against the old marble floor. When the elevator doors opened, I stepped inside and pressed the button for the lobby. The doors began to close. A hand appeared between them. I stepped back. The doors opened again. A man walked in. He was tall, dressed in a charcoal suit beneath a black overcoat, with the kind of calm expression that made the crowded streets of New York seem very far away. He pressed the lobby button even though it was already selected. Then he looked at me. I recognized him immediately. Adrian Blackwood. My breath caught. He glanced at the measuring tape hanging from my wrist, then at the black silk fibers on my sleeve. Claire Bennett, he said. It was not a question. I stared at him. How do you know my name? The corner of his mouth moved slightly, but it was not quite a smile. I know the name of everyone who works for me. I frowned. I do not work for you. The elevator descended slowly. Adrian looked at the reflection of us in the polished doors. Not yet. The words should have sounded arrogant. Somehow, they sounded more like a warning. The elevator reached the lobby. The doors opened. I stepped out first. Adrian followed. Before I could reach the front entrance, he spoke again. You found the emblem. I stopped. My fingers tightened around the strap of my bag. What emblem? His eyes met mine. For the first time, I saw something beneath that calm expression. Concern. The one you were never meant to see. Do not take that piece of silk out of your pocket. Adrian's voice was quiet, but the words stopped me faster than any shout could have. I stood near the glass entrance of the atelier, one hand gripping my bag, the other pressed against the coat where the small black square was hidden. Outside, the rain had softened to a steady mist. Manhattan was beginning to wake, taxis moving through the wet streets, delivery trucks stopping along the curb, apartment windows glowing one by one above us. Everything looked ordinary. I suddenly felt like the only person who had stepped into a different world. Why? I asked. Adrian looked toward the front windows before answering. Because whoever left it for you wanted you to find it. I swallowed. You said I was never supposed to see it. You were not. Then why did you know I would? He studied me for a moment. Because someone made a mistake. I almost laughed. That is supposed to make me feel better? No, his answer came immediately. It is supposed to make you careful. I had spent years around customers who believed money could solve every problem. They complained about loose stitching, demanded impossible deadlines, and treated people like me as if we were invisible. Adrian was different. He did not need to raise his voice. He did not need to prove anything. He simply spoke, and somehow the entire room seemed to listen. I opened my bag. What exactly is this emblem? His expression changed when he saw the black silk square between my fingers. It belonged to my family. The Blackwood family? He nodded. And it should not have been inside your jacket. I frowned. I did not put it there. I know. Then who did? He did not answer. Instead, he reached into his coat and placed a small photograph on the counter beside me. The picture was old, the edges worn soft with time. It showed a woman standing outside the same atelier. She was wearing a simple white dress, her dark hair pulled back, one hand resting lightly against the glass door. I stared at the image. Something inside me went completely still. I knew that face. Not from a newspaper. Not from a painting. From a photograph I had seen every year of my life. My mother, I whispered. Adrian watched me carefully. Her name was Eleanor Bennett. I looked up so quickly that my neck hurt. How do you know my mother? For several seconds, he said nothing. The silence between us felt heavier than the rain outside. Finally, Adrian took the photograph back. Because she saved my life once. I stared at him. When? His eyes lowered to the black silk emblem in my hand. Before you were born. I wanted to ask another question, but a sound came from the street. A car door closing. Adrian glanced toward the window. His calm expression returned, but something had changed. He looked at me and said, "You need to go home." Why? Because someone else is looking for that silk. I tightened my grip around it. Who? Adrian looked directly into my eyes. The person who has been searching for your mother for 25 years. The person searching for my mother has been looking for 25 years? I repeated, unable to make the sentence sound real. Adrian did not answer immediately. He stood beside the glass doors of the atelier, watching the rain gather along the sidewalk as if the city outside had suddenly become a map only he could read. Go home, Claire. You keep saying that. Because you need to. And you keep avoiding my questions. His eyes returned to mine. Because some answers are safer when you are ready to hear them. I felt frustration rise in my chest. I had spent most of my life believing my mother had died when I was 6. That was the story my father had given me. Eleanor Bennett had been gone before I was old enough to remember her voice clearly. There were photographs, a few letters, a silver necklace, and one faded white dress stored in the back of my closet. That was all I had. Or so I thought. You knew her, I said. Yes. You knew she had a daughter. Adrian paused. Yes. The word landed harder than I expected. I stepped closer. Then why have you never found me? Because your mother asked me not to. My breath caught. She knew you? She trusted me. Why? He looked toward the photograph still resting on the counter. That is the part one cannot explain in the lobby of your workplace at 3 in the morning. I glanced at the clock. 3:04 a.m. The entire building felt suspended between night and morning. Then explain it somewhere else. Adrian considered me for a long moment. Tomorrow. I almost objected, but he reached into his coat and placed a small black card on the counter. No phone number. No address. Only a name embossed in silver. Blackwood. Beneath it was a time. 7 o'clock. Where? I asked. The Blackwood Foundation on 5th Avenue. I stared at the card. You expect me to walk into your building alone? No, he took a breath. I will meet you outside. There was something strangely reassuring about the way he said it. Not controlling. Not demanding. Simply certain. I picked up the card. And the silk? His expression became serious again. Keep it with you. You just told me not to take it out. I changed my mind. Why? Adrian looked at the emblem for several seconds. Because now I know why it was left for you. Before I could ask what he meant, he turned toward the door. Wait. He stopped. What happened to my mother? For the first time since I had met him, Adrian looked away. She disappeared because she believed someone close to her had betrayed her. My fingers tightened around the card. Did she die? He looked back at me. I do not know. Then he opened the door and stepped into the rain. I remained frozen beside the counter, staring at the photograph of the woman I had spent 19 years believing I had lost forever. For the first time, a different possibility entered my mind. Maybe my mother had not left me. Maybe she had been trying to come back. My mother did not leave me. Someone made sure I believed she did. The thought followed me all the way home. By the time I reached my apartment in Queens, the rain had stopped, but my mind had not. I dropped my bag on the kitchen chair and stood there in the quiet, still wearing the coat I had worked in all night. The black silk square was in my pocket. Adrian Blackwood's card was in my hand. 2 small pieces of fabric and paper had somehow turned my entire childhood into a question. I made coffee, even though I knew I should have gone straight to bed. Sleep felt impossible. I opened the drawer beside my sink and pulled out the old wooden box I had not touched in years. Inside were the few things my father had kept after my mother disappeared. A faded photograph. 3 letters. A silver necklace. And a small piece of white silk folded into a square. My fingers stopped. I had seen that fabric before. I unfolded it carefully. The silk was old, soft from years of being handled, with a tiny embroidered pattern along one corner. A crown. The same crown as the emblem Adrian had shown me. My heart began to pound. I placed the black silk square beside the white one. They were different colors, but the stitching was almost identical. I reached for the oldest photograph. My mother stood outside the same Manhattan atelier where I had worked for the past 4 years. She was younger than I remembered. Maybe 30. Her hair was pulled back, and she was wearing the silver necklace I had inherited. Beside her stood a man whose face had been partially turned away from the camera. I stared at him. The shape of his shoulders looked familiar. The dark suit looked familiar. But I could not place him. Then I noticed something else. On the back of the photograph, written in my mother's handwriting, were 5 words. Trust the man in black. I sat down slowly. My mother had written that sentence long before I understood what it meant. I had never seen it because the photograph had been sealed inside the wooden box for years. My father had never mentioned it. Why? I looked at the clock. 5:18 a.m. In less than 2 hours, I was supposed to meet Adrian at the Blackwood Foundation. I should have stayed home. Every reasonable thought in my mind told me that. But another part of me, the part that had spent 19 years wondering what my mother's voice sounded like, needed answers. At 6:20 a.m., I changed into a simple navy dress and put the silver necklace around my neck. I slipped both pieces of silk into my bag. Then I looked at myself in the mirror. I barely recognized the woman staring back. Not because I looked different. Because I finally had something I had never had before. A possibility. At 6:57 a.m., I arrived on 5th Avenue. The Blackwood Foundation rose above the street in polished stone and glass. I stopped across from the entrance. A black sedan waited at the curb. Adrian stood beside it, dressed simply in a dark suit. When he saw me, his expression changed. His eyes dropped to the necklace around my neck. Then to the bag in my hand. He crossed the sidewalk slowly. "Where did you get that necklace?" he asked. I touched the silver pendant. It belonged to my mother. Adrian went completely still. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then he looked at me with something I had never seen in his eyes before. Recognition. And fear. "Claire," he said quietly, "your mother did not disappear alone. Your mother did not disappear alone." Adrian's words stayed between us as the morning traffic moved around 5th Avenue. I looked at him, waiting for the rest of the sentence, but he said nothing. He only stared at the silver necklace around my neck as if it carried a memory he had spent years trying to forget. "What does that mean?" I asked. Adrian glanced toward the entrance of the Blackwood Foundation. "It means we should not have this conversation outside." I followed him through the glass doors. The lobby was enormous, all polished stone, soft lighting, and quiet footsteps. People in tailored suits moved through the space with practiced confidence. I suddenly became aware of my simple navy dress and the rain still clinging to the hem of my coat. I had never felt so ordinary. Adrian noticed. You do not have to impress anyone here. I am not trying to. Good. He walked beside me. Because none of them matter. We entered a private elevator. The doors closed, and the noise of Fifth Avenue disappeared. I looked at my reflection in the mirrored wall. The silver necklace rested against my collar, the same necklace my mother had worn in the photograph. Tell me about her, I said. Adrian remained silent for several seconds. Your mother was intelligent. She was stubborn. She had a way of asking questions people preferred not to answer. I almost smiled. That sounds like me. His eyes met mine in the reflection. Yes. It does. The elevator opened onto a quiet floor filled with framed photographs and old paintings. Adrian led me into a library. Books covered 3 walls. Sunlight filtered through tall windows, turning dust in the air into tiny floating points of gold. He closed the door behind us and walked to a cabinet near the fireplace. From inside, he removed a thin leather folder. He placed it on the table but did not open it. 25 years ago, your mother worked for my family. I stared at him. As what? She was a designer. My eyes moved to the folder. That is why you wanted me to make your suit. Adrian nodded. I saw your work before I ever met you. How? Your stitching. He touched the edge of the folder. It reminded me of hers. My chest tightened. You knew it was me? I suspected. When? The first night I saw you through the atelier window. I remembered the silhouette in the rain. You were watching me. Yes. Why did you not come inside? Adrian looked toward the window. Because I needed to know whether the resemblance was real. He finally opened the folder. Inside were photographs, old letters, and sketches of clothing. At the top was a photograph of my mother standing beside a younger Adrian. He looked barely 20 years old. My mother was smiling at the camera. Adrian was not. He was looking at her. I lifted the photograph carefully. You were close. She was important to me. Was she important to your family? His expression hardened slightly. More than you know. I turned another page. There was a sketch of a white silk dress. In the corner, my mother had written a single sentence. If anything happens, find Claire. My hands went cold. I looked up. She knew something was going to happen. Adrian nodded. She knew she was being watched. By whom? He closed the folder. That is what I have spent 25 years trying to discover. I stared at him. Then why bring me here? Adrian looked at the necklace again. Because this morning, I realized something. He reached for the photograph of my mother and placed it beside the necklace. She did not leave this for you by accident. She left this for you, Claire. Not for me. Adrian's words made the room feel smaller. I looked down at the silver necklace lying beside my mother's photograph, trying to understand how something I had worn since childhood could carry a secret no one had told me. What does it mean? I asked. Adrian pulled a chair back for me, then sat across the table. Your mother believed someone inside my family could not be trusted. Someone inside your family? Yes. He opened the leather folder again and removed another photograph. This one showed a much larger group standing outside the Blackwood estate. My mother was near the center. Adrian stood several feet away beside an older man with silver hair. I recognized him immediately. I had seen his portrait in the lobby downstairs. Who is that? I asked. My father. I looked back at the photograph. And my mother worked for him? She designed clothing for private events and family occasions. But that was only part of her role. What was the other part? Adrian hesitated. She kept records. Records of what? People. Meetings. Agreements. Things she believed could become important later. I leaned forward. Why would a designer keep records for your family? Adrian looked at the old photograph. Because my father trusted her more than most people around him. That answer made my stomach tighten. And someone did not like that. He nodded. Not everyone. He reached into the folder and placed a folded piece of white paper in front of me. The handwriting was unmistakably my mother's. I recognized the shape of every letter from the few birthday cards she had left behind. My hands trembled as I opened it. There were only 2 sentences. If Claire ever comes looking for me, tell her the truth. The silk will show her where to begin. I looked up. What does that mean? Adrian leaned back slowly. I do not know yet. You do not know? I know where the silk came from. He pointed toward the black square in my bag. But I do not know why someone placed it in your jacket after all these years. I reached inside and pulled it out. Under the library lights, the tiny silver emblem looked different. More detailed. Almost like a pattern rather than a logo. I turned it over. A faint line of stitching ran along the edge. There is something here, I whispered. Adrian stood and moved closer, keeping a respectful distance as he examined the fabric. Hold it toward the light. I did. The sunlight passed through the thin silk, revealing a second pattern hidden inside the weave. It looked like a small map. My breath caught. Adrian immediately recognized it. That is the old Blackwood estate. I stared at the shape. Why would my mother hide a map inside a piece of silk? Because she knew nobody would search there. Search for what? Adrian did not answer. Instead, his attention shifted toward the library door. A quiet knock sounded from the other side. He closed the folder. Stay here. Who is it? He opened the door only halfway. An older man stood in the hallway wearing a dark suit and holding a sealed envelope. His eyes moved past Adrian and landed on me. For one long second, he said nothing. Then he looked at the necklace around my neck. His face changed. Eleanor's daughter, he whispered. Adrian's expression became unreadable. The man handed him the envelope. She was right. They finally found her. They finally found her. The words echoed in my mind as Adrian closed the library door. The older man remained in the hallway, his expression pale and uncertain. I could not stop staring at him. He had looked at me as if he had expected to see my face for years. Who are they? I asked. Adrian turned toward me. We need to leave. You keep saying that every time something important happens. Because every answer brings another question. Then give me one answer. He looked at the envelope in his hand. Your mother disappeared from the Blackwood estate 25 years ago. I stepped closer. And you think she is still alive? Adrian did not answer. That silence was enough. My heart began beating faster. For 19 years, I had carried the same grief. I had learned how to live with an empty space where my mother should have been. Now Adrian was asking me to consider that the space might not be empty at all. The older man entered the library and quietly closed the door behind him. My name is Thomas Reed, he said. I worked for your mother. I stared at him. Do you know where she is? Thomas looked at Adrian first. Then at me. No. But I know where she wanted you to go. He opened his hand and revealed a small brass key. It was old, no longer shiny, with a tiny crown engraved into the top. My fingers moved toward it before I could stop myself. Adrian caught the movement with his eyes. Where did you get that? He asked. Thomas answered quietly. She gave it to me the last night I saw her. I took the key. It felt strangely familiar, even though I had never seen it before. What does it open? Thomas looked toward the black silk square on the table. A room at the old estate. Adrian's expression tightened. That room was sealed. Not anymore, Thomas said. Someone opened it last week. I looked between them. Someone was there? Thomas nodded. And they left something behind. What? He looked at me. A white silk dress. My breath caught. My mother had owned a white dress. The same dress I had seen in the old photograph. You are certain? I asked. I would know it anywhere. Adrian picked up the envelope. Why did you bring this now? Thomas looked at him with quiet regret. Because the message inside was dated 25 years ago. Adrian opened the envelope carefully. Inside was a single folded letter. He read the first few lines, then stopped. His eyes lifted to mine. What does it say? I asked. He hesitated. It is from your mother. My hands went cold. Read it. Adrian unfolded the page. The room became completely silent as he began. Adrian, if Claire is standing beside you when you read this, then I was right about the passage of time. She has grown up. She has found the silk. And someone has finally begun searching for her. I could barely breathe. Adrian continued. Do not take her to the estate unless she chooses to go. Do not tell her everything until she asks. And above all, do not let anyone convince her that she owes the Blackwood family anything. I looked at Adrian. Why would my mother write that? He lowered the letter. Because she knew my family had made mistakes. Thomas quietly added, and because she knew one day you would have to choose whether to walk into that house. I looked down at the brass key in my palm. For the first time, the old Blackwood estate did not feel like a place from someone else's past. It felt like a door waiting for me. I will go. The words left my mouth before I could reconsider them. Adrian looked at me across the library table, his expression unreadable. Thomas stood near the window, holding the edge of the curtain as he watched the street below. You understand what that means? Adrian asked. It means I want answers. It means you are walking into a place your mother was afraid of. I looked down at the brass key in my hand. Then I should know why. Adrian was silent for a moment. We leave in 20 minutes. The old estate was less than an hour outside Manhattan, but the drive felt much longer. I sat in the back seat beside the window, watching the city disappear behind us. Adrian sat across from me, quiet, reading through my mother's letter again. Thomas remained in the front. Nobody spoke for several miles. Finally, I broke the silence. Why did my mother trust you? Adrian closed the letter. I do not know if she trusted me completely. She wrote your name. She trusted me enough to ask me to protect you. I looked at him. From your family? His eyes moved toward the passing trees. From certain people in it. The road became narrower as we left the highway. The houses grew farther apart. Autumn leaves covered the ground in shades of gold and brown. Then the estate appeared beyond a long stone wall. I had expected something grand. Instead, it looked tired. Beautiful, but tired. The windows were tall. The roof was dark. Ivy covered one side of the building. It looked less like a mansion and more like a memory that had been left standing too long. Adrian stopped near the entrance. You can still change your mind. I opened the car door. I know. Inside, the air smelled faintly of old wood and dust. Adrian walked ahead, but I noticed something immediately. He did not look comfortable here. His shoulders were tense. His eyes moved across the hallway as if every photograph carried a memory he did not want to revisit. You grew up here? I asked. Partly. We passed a large portrait of Adrian's father. I stopped beneath it. He looked serious. Adrian glanced at the portrait. He was. Were you close? Not in the way you mean. He kept walking. We reached a narrow staircase at the end of the hall. Thomas pointed toward a corridor. "The room is this way." We followed him until he stopped before an old wooden door. There was no handle on the outside, only a small brass lock. I took out the key. My hand shook slightly as I inserted it. The lock turned with surprising ease. The door opened. Inside was a small room filled with covered furniture and old storage boxes. Dust floated through a beam of afternoon light. On the far wall hung a large mirror. I walked toward it. Something about the room felt familiar. Then I noticed a small table beneath the mirror. On it was a white silk dress. I touched the fabric carefully. It was the same material I had seen in my mother's photographs. A small envelope rested beside it. My name was written across the front in handwriting I had not seen since childhood. Claire. I stared at it, unable to move. Adrian stood behind me. "Do you want me to stay?" I looked at the envelope. Then I looked at him. "No," I picked it up. "I need to hear this from her. Dear Claire, if you are reading this, then you have found the room I prayed you would never need to enter." I sat on the edge of the old chair, holding my mother's letter with both hands. The paper was soft with age, but her handwriting was unmistakable. I traced one line with my fingertip, remembering birthday cards, grocery lists, and the little notes she used to leave beside my breakfast when I was a child. For a moment, I could almost hear her voice. Then I continued reading. "I need you to know one thing before you learn anything else. I never abandoned you." My eyes blurred. I stopped and took a slow breath. Behind me, the room remained silent. Adrian had respected my request and stayed outside the doorway. I read the next line. "Your father believed that leaving you with him was the safest choice. I believed it too, until I discovered that someone within the Blackwood family had been hiding information from us." I looked toward the doorway. Adrian was standing there, but he did not move. "What information?" I asked. "I do not know," he said. "Not yet." I looked back at the letter. "Then keep listening." The next paragraph explained that my mother had discovered records connected to the Blackwood family. They were not criminal records or secret business documents. They were names, dates, meetings, and decisions that had affected people outside the family. She had copied the information because she believed someone might eventually need to know the truth. Then came the sentence that made my hands tremble. "The person I trusted most was the one who convinced me to disappear." I stared at those words. "Who was it?" I whispered. Adrian stepped closer but stopped several feet away. "She never wrote the name." I continued reading. "If you have found the black silk, then someone has already opened the old records. Do not trust anyone who tells you that the past is finished." I looked down at the fabric beside me. "Why would she hide this in silk?" Adrian answered quietly. "Because your mother understood that people notice expensive things, but they rarely inspect what is holding them together." I looked at him. That sounded exactly like something she would have done. I read the final lines. "Claire, there is a place beneath the old estate where I kept the truth. The white dress will show you the way. Take the person you trust most. Choose carefully." My heart stopped for a moment. I lowered the letter. Adrian said nothing. I looked at the white silk dress hanging beside the mirror. A thin blue thread was sewn into the hem. I reached down and followed it with my fingers. The thread led to a tiny stitched symbol near the bottom of the dress. A crown. Beneath it was a single letter. Not B.E. Eleanor. My mother had hidden her initials inside the fabric. I looked at Adrian. "She wanted me to find something beneath this house." He nodded. "Yes. And she told me to bring the person I trust most." Adrian's eyes remained on mine. "Do you trust me?" I wanted to answer immediately. Instead, I looked at the letter again. My mother had warned me to choose carefully. I folded the page and placed it inside my bag. I do not know yet, I said. Then the floor beneath the old mirror creaked softly. We both turned. A narrow panel had shifted open beneath the wall. Behind it was a dark staircase leading downward. The staircase was not on any blueprint. Adrian stood beside me, staring into the narrow opening beneath the mirror. I could see only a few stone steps disappearing into darkness. The house had been built more than a century ago, yet somehow my mother had known about a hidden passage beneath it. I held the letter against my chest. She knew this was here. Adrian nodded. She knew more about this house than I ever did. I looked at him. Then you are coming with me. His expression softened for the first time. You trust me enough? Enough to find out. We stepped onto the first stair. The air became cooler as we descended. Old stone walls surrounded us, and every sound seemed to echo for several seconds before fading. I kept one hand against the wall and the other around the small black silk square in my pocket. Adrian walked a few steps ahead, holding a small flashlight from his phone. After about 30 feet, the staircase ended at a narrow corridor. A wooden door stood at the far end. Above it was the same crown symbol I had seen stitched into the silk. I reached for the handle, but Adrian stopped me. Wait. He examined the door carefully. There is writing here. I leaned closer. Nearly invisible beneath years of dust were 4 words. Eleanor had written them by hand. Truth belongs to the brave. I smiled despite myself. That sounds like her. Adrian looked at me. You remember her? Not enough. But sometimes I remember little things. Her hands. Her voice. The smell of her perfume. The way she used to hum while sewing. He looked away. She used to hum when she was nervous. I turned toward him. You remember that? I remember everything about her. There was something in his voice that made me pause. Not romance. Not regret. Something deeper. Respect. Loss. The kind of memory that never needed to announce itself. I opened the door. Inside was a small underground room with shelves along every wall. Old boxes filled the shelves. Some were labeled with dates. Others carried names. I recognized several Blackwood family names. Then I saw mine. Claire Bennett. My breath caught. Adrian stepped beside me. Do not open that one yet. Why? Because your mother left it for you. I reached toward the box anyway, then stopped. You said you wanted answers. I do. Then why are you afraid of this? Adrian looked at the box. Because I have spent 25 years wondering what your mother discovered. I pulled it from the shelf. It was smaller than I expected. Inside was a stack of letters tied with white ribbon, a photograph, and a small brass key. I picked up the photograph first. It showed my mother standing beside Adrian's father. Behind them was a young man I had never seen before. I turned the photograph over. There was another message in my mother's handwriting. The person who betrayed me is not the person you think. I looked at Adrian. Who did you think betrayed her? He was silent. Then his eyes moved to the photograph. My father. I stared at him. You believed your father betrayed my mother? Adrian nodded slowly. For 25 years. I untied the ribbon around the letters. Before I could open the first one, we heard footsteps above us. Adrian looked toward the ceiling. I froze. The sound stopped. Then a voice drifted faintly through the old house. Claire? It was Thomas. But something about his voice sounded different. Adrian looked at me. Stay here. I shook my head. No, I held the letters tighter. Whatever happens next, we face it together. Claire, do not open those letters. The voice above us was unmistakable. Thomas. But there was something different in it now. Not fear. Urgency. Adrian looked toward the ceiling, then at me. We need to move. I held the box against my chest. Why? Because Thomas should not know we are down here. The words barely left his mouth before the old floorboards above us creaked again. I looked at the letters tied with white ribbon. My mother had hidden them for 25 years. Whatever they contained, she had believed I would eventually need them. I slipped the box into my bag. Adrian picked up the flashlight and led me toward the far wall. There is another way out. How do you know? My mother showed me when I was a child. We reached a narrow stone passage behind the shelves. Adrian moved one of the wooden panels, revealing a second staircase. I followed him upward until we reached a small room behind the main library. The door opened quietly. The house was silent again. Thomas was nowhere in sight. I looked at Adrian. Where did he go? I do not know. I opened my bag and pulled out the first letter. Then we read these now. Adrian nodded. We sat beside the library window while morning light spread across the room. I unfolded the first letter carefully. Claire, if you have found these pages, then you are old enough to understand that the truth is not always the same as the story people tell you. I stopped. My eyes moved over every word. Your father did not know everything. I asked him to keep you away from the Blackwood family because I believed distance would keep you safe. But distance became silence, and silence became a lie. I looked at Adrian. She blamed herself. She was trying to protect you, he said. I continued reading. The person who betrayed me was someone I trusted completely. He knew where I kept the records. He knew about the hidden room. He knew about Claire. My heart tightened. Who? The letter did not say. Instead, the next line read, he wears the Blackwood name, but he is not the man you should fear. I looked at Adrian. He was staring at the page. My mother was protecting someone. He nodded. Perhaps. I opened the second letter. This one was shorter. Adrian, if Claire ever returns to the estate, tell her about the night I disappeared. Do not hide your part in it. I looked up. Adrian had gone completely still. Your part? I asked. He lowered his eyes. I was there that night. You never told me that. You never asked. I asked what happened to my mother. His voice became quieter. And I told you I did not know where she went. I stared at him. But you knew she planned to disappear. He nodded. I helped her leave the estate. The room seemed to lose all its warmth. Why? Adrian looked toward the window. Because she asked me to protect you. He paused. And because she believed someone inside my family would eventually find you. I folded the letter and placed it beside the others. Then why did you let me come here? Adrian looked directly at me. Because your mother left one final instruction. What was it? He reached into the box and removed the brass key. She told me that when you were ready, I had to give you this. He placed it in my palm. It opens the last room. I stared at the key. Where? Adrian pointed toward the portrait of his father. Behind that wall. Behind that wall, Adrian said. I looked at the portrait of his father, then at the brass key resting in my palm. For 25 years, my mother had been carrying a secret that had somehow survived every lie, every unanswered question, and every year I had spent believing she was gone. Now the final answer was waiting behind a wall. I walked toward the portrait and stopped beneath it. Adrian stood several feet behind me. What happens if this changes everything? I asked. Then we face what it changes. I found a narrow keyhole hidden beneath the frame. The brass key fit perfectly. I turned it. A quiet click echoed through the library, and part of the wall shifted inward. Behind it was a small room filled with morning light from a narrow window. There was no treasure. No dramatic secret chamber. Only a desk, an old sewing machine, several boxes, and one chair facing the window. My mother had been here. I knew it immediately. The room carried the faint scent of cedar and old fabric. On the desk rested a single envelope. My name was written across it. Claire. My hands trembled as I picked it up. Adrian remained by the doorway. "Do you want me to leave?" he asked. I looked at him. "No. Stay." I opened the envelope. The letter inside was longer than the others. "My dearest Claire, if you are reading this, then you have finally found the room where I kept the truth. I wish I could have told you everything myself. I wish you had known my voice instead of my absence. But sometimes a mother protects her child by becoming a memory." I closed my eyes for a moment. Then I continued. There was no enemy waiting outside our family. The danger was the lie itself. Your father believed I had betrayed him. My family believed I had betrayed them. Adrian was the only person who knew I was trying to protect you. I looked up. Adrian lowered his eyes. Your mother discovered that someone had been using the Blackwood name to control decisions that never should have been made. She gathered proof, but she refused to use it against innocent people. Instead, she asked Adrian to help her hide it until you were old enough to understand. I looked around the room. The boxes suddenly seemed different. Not forgotten things. Pieces of a life. She wanted me to find all of this. Adrian nodded. She wanted you to choose what came next. I read the final lines. Claire, you are not a Blackwood. You do not owe this family your loyalty, your forgiveness, or your future. If you ever meet Adrian, remember that he helped me because he believed people should be given a choice. If you trust him, let it be because he earned it. If you do not, walk away without guilt. My eyes filled with tears. I lowered the letter and looked at Adrian. He did not move toward me. He did not ask for forgiveness. He simply waited. You could have hidden all of this, I said. Yes. Why did you not? He looked at the photograph of my mother on the desk. Because she asked me to give you the truth. I smiled through my tears. She knew I would come looking. She knew you were brave. I looked at the white silk dress hanging near the window, then at the black silk square in my hand. 2 colors. 2 lives. 1 unfinished story. I folded my mother's letter carefully and placed it against my heart. Then I turned toward Adrian. I do not know what happens next. He nodded. Neither do I. For the first time, neither of us needed an answer. Outside, sunlight crossed the old windows and touched the silk until it seemed almost golden. I finally understood what my mother had left behind. Not a fortune. Not a family name. A choice. And for the first time in my life, the future belonged entirely to me.